So friends, in the discussion happened previously, I referred to impressions and opinions and messages, etc. And that was in the context of the play Lower Depths by Maxim Gorky that we are discussing today. So in this particular part of the discussion, I'll tell you about what actually happens in the play. Because if there are moments, then those moments don't suggest anything. And something should happen in the play, but if you are in the hall and you are watching a play, with characters being involved in certain situations, and they don't know that they are being watched by the audience, and they are totally immersed in the situation there, then the audience is supposed to just take some impressions from what is presented on the stage. So I believe that in such a play as this, impressions become important. So what you see in front of you happening on the stage, characters facing the problems, and they are going through different moods, that itself starts working in your mind, that starts working in my mind if I watch such a play, and that the play starts happening from the stage in our own minds. So and it's an activity concerned with the play, and it's a new kind of a play in the early 20th century, and I'll tell you later that this play, started a trend, and finally the trend, took up, very effectively in the cultural horizon, and people started talking about impressions. So you see, and then you think, and then you form impressions about the healthy or the unhealthy aspects of life. That is what impressions are. And the display uses the technique of creating impressions on the minds of the audience. The second thing is opinions. Impressions compel you to think. Already the audience has watched certain other plays. Already the audience has come from a particular society. Already the audience is of young, old, of men, women, of people from different regions in the country and the society where they live, and they have their opinions already about life. They have seen those opinions forming themselves in their minds, in their own surroundings. And here, when the impression is given on the stage, then that impression is sought to be examined and interpreted by the audience themselves. So a kind of clash occurs between what the people think about these things presented on the stage in the context of their opinions. And then those opinions suggest to us that this is what the writer is saying, wrongly or rightly. The dramatist is not bothered, and particularly Gorky would not bother about what people say, but he will say, okay, you have your opinion, but then this is what the situation is in front of you in the early part of the 20th century. Before I dilate upon this point further, let me tell you that the early 20th century was a horrendous period, was a very depressing period, was a very threatening period for the intelligentsia, for the educational educated section in society. And when Gorky started talking about these ordinary people in his own time, then it started working on the minds of the people. And Gorky would not give an opinion. Gorky would just present, so they had to form their own opinions, because when you come to watch a play, then it works at different levels. One can be the level of propaganda, as I said earlier. Another can be the level of watching a certain episode. The third can be that it might clash with your own interests. If you accept this, then you become critical in your own life, and so on and so forth. But the writer, intelligently and sensitively, is not telling you what to think. He is just only saying that this is what is happening around life there in Russia in the early 20th century, and therefore you are free to form your own opinion. If somebody says this, if somebody doesn't make characters give long speeches in the play, as happened in the case of Bernard Shaw, who was an exact contemporary of Maxim Gorky, then one can say that this is an open-ended suggestions. What is open-ended? That there is no end result. End result is happening somewhere else. That will happen in your mind when you watch the play. And the writer will simply say, think what you want to, think what you wish to, think what appeals to you, and do not bother about me. Do not bother about the characters that I am presenting to you. That is one. The second thing is that in this thing, in this particular play, there is no narrative. Narrative means a story which has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So when there is a beginning, then you become curious, and there are results of the beginning that take you along the path towards the end. That is called the narrative. So narrative is there generally in a short story, that is there in a folk tale, it is there in a novel, it is also there in drama, because drama also is saying, is telling a kind of a story on the stage with the help of different characters. But so far as lower depths is concerned, we know that and we see that there is no narrative here. It doesn't begin, it could begin anywhere. The second act could be the first act and vice versa. So there is no narrative. So don't you think it's a strange kind of a play where there is no story? Mostly when we watch a play, then we expect the writer to tell us some details about life that will take us further, and that there will be cause and effect kind of a situation on the stage. But when you watch this play happening on the stage, then you know that there is no story here. There are people and they are talking, and their talking does not affect one another on the stage, and it may not also affect us because there is no narrative. The third is movement. Now, movement is a part of the narrative. Movement means that things lead somewhere, but things don't lead anywhere. Now, one thing is that it's a still kind of a play. It's a kind of a picture. It's a kind of a still picture. It's a kind of a painting, one can say. The other thing is that what is being shown is that which is barren in nature. So, can you think of times when nothing changed for some time, for 10 years, 15 years? People suffered and suffered and suffered. There were no jobs and there was hunger. People were dying, but they were not angry. They were not asking questions. And the king and the court would not bother about the starving people, because that movement was not there in life and society. In fact, the early 20th century Russia was this kind of a society where the people who were poor were left alone by the regime, by the people who ruled the world. It was a czarist regime at that time, and Tsar, in his own court would remain busy with his personal happiness and the happiness of his friends and supporters, and he would not bother about providing bread and butter to people, in the country, nor would he, give them facilities of jobs, that they have a job and then they, earn some money out of it and then satisfy their hunger and their other needs. So there is no movement in the society, and if there is no movement in the society, that the writer, I think, would be naturally presenting the lack of movement in society on the stage, and this is what is happening in this play. There is no movement. Then I say development. Now, development is a part of the movement, but development is specific. Movement is general. That you say that okay, things should change on the stage. They don't change. They remain the same. In different acts of the play, there are 4 acts. Things are not moved anywhere. The same people they are there. They fight. They become calm. They become angry. They start discussing. But then there is no movement. It doesn't lead them anywhere. So that kind of a thing is there in the play. Development is not there, and growth is not there. No, the word that I am using is that all these are conspicuous by their absence in the play. You are watching a play on the stage which doesn't have, let me repeat, a narrative, which doesn't have a movement, which doesn't have a development, which doesn't have a growth. There are only opinions, impressions, and open-ended suggestions. So, would you really like to watch such a play? I think you would like to, because the play is very enlightening. The play is actually taking attention away from the stage to the society outside the theatre hall, and that is what the relevance of the plays in the early 20th century. And when I said in the beginning that it became a rage, it was for this reason alone, because the readers, the audience of the play, they would just think of their own life, which was also movementless, which was also developmentless, which is also growthless. Nothing happened in society, and therefore the play showed the picture of their minds, the landscape of their minds, their sensibilities on the stage, and that caught up with the audience. When the play is presented in 1902, then in 1905, there will be a big protest against the regime, and the regime would be shaken for some time, and then there will be arrests, and then the jails are made full, and those who participated in the protests, they were hounded out from cities, and they might have run away, and all these things happened, and Gorky himself had to leave the country. So that happened in 1905, but 1905 was the result of this lack of movement in society in 1902. So those 3 years were actually the forming ground of the movement that happened suddenly. It was a kind of an eruption. It was a kind of explosion that happened in Russia in 1905. So that's how writers sometimes tell of things which might happen in the future, and that in order to understand those things, one has to refer to one's own conditions, and this is where this play becomes relevant. Now let's have a look at the characters in the play, and you will know what exactly I am saying. See the characters. I particularly wrote down the names of the characters and their age in each case. For instance, there is a character who is the owner of a lodging house. It's a kind of a house where rooms or space is rented out, and there is a kitchen, and you can work in the kitchen, and you can cook your food, or you can bring food from outside, or maybe if you pay the money, then the keeper of the lodging house might also arrange some food for you, or ask some people to come and sell the food to you. That's called the lodging house in the 20th century Russia. So there is a person called Kostyulev, and he is the owner of the lodging house, and the writer tells us in the beginning, on the first page of the play, he is 54 years old, and why the age is mentioned, you have to think about it, because this person has lived a specific kind of a life for a good number of years, considering that he is 54 years old. And then there is another character, Vasilisa, his wife, who is 26 years. That raises questions. Somebody is 54 years and he has such a young wife, and this wife would definitely not be happy with the way this person is running the lodging house, and she might have her own problems of age. She might have problems of wants and facilities, and therefore it's a strange kind of a couple that the writer is presenting. And the next character is Natasha. Natasha is the sister of the wife. So you can imagine two women living in the house of Kostyulev, and that is his family. The wife is 26 years, the sister-in-law is 20 years, and the fourth person in the family, if one can call it a family, is Medvedev, and that is their uncle, the uncle of the two girls, and he is 50 years, so 4 years junior to the owner of the lodge, and he is a policeman. Is there a connection between the owner of the house and the policeman? Well, there is no connection, because the policeman has to work outside. He only lives here, and he spends his free time here in order to just just be with them, just to interact with them, to watch them, and sometimes also to discipline them. So such a family will have no picture specific to Russia in the 20th century, except that it will tell you that women are not being treated as properly as friends and companions by the man, and that he must be fighting with a young wife and a still younger sister-in-law, and that the fourth person in the family, if it's called a family, because there's nothing like a family here. So he's a policeman, and his work is outside. So he just lives here, and he spends time whenever he is back. Then the other person is Vasya people, a man of 28 years old. What is he doing in the lodging house? He just lives there, and he perhaps doesn't have a job because he's all the time in the house, and his age is 28 years. Perhaps he can form a better equation with the women living next to him. One is 26 years and the other is 20, and he can be a bone of contention. He can be some kind of a cause of trouble for the owner of the lodge, because he can see his wife taking interest in him. They are the same age, and even the younger sister of the wife can also be interested in being in his company, and that way some possibilities are there. The writer doesn't show any of the possibilities directly. He just makes them talk to one another, and then sees that some tensions emerge. Those tensions will not lead these characters anywhere. They remain there. Sometimes there is a fight, and later on there is going to be a fight between Vasya people and the owner of the lodge, and also the woman who is his wife, and the cause can be the younger sister, but then all that leads to nothing in the play. So they live together, they spend their time together, and they have different changing moods from one situation to another, and that's how things have been going on. Perhaps there is a suggestion there that the way situations are presented at this time, the same way would have persisted yesterday, and the same might persist tomorrow. So it's a kind of a painting, a kind of a still that carries suggestions of a negative movement, a movement, downward movement, and that's why perhaps the play is called Lower Depths, because they are bound to suffer in the process of living in these conditions. And a lodging house is particularly important because people are not connected through work. They are connected only through the necessity of living there, because they have to protect themselves from cold, and they have to in whatever way they have to survive with less bread and other facilities, etc. Then there is another woman called Anna. Then there is a person called Kleshk. He is a locksmith and the policeman. Both of them share the same lodging house, and then there is and he is 40 years. So you can see that there is an age gap, and the one is 50, the other is 54, the third is 40, and there are two women who are in their 20s, and there is a young man who himself is 28 years old. So what kind of a group is this? I call it a group which is not connected, which is not unified, which doesn't have any bonds, and they are all individuals, and they seem all to be the victims of circumstance. Where is the circumstance? The circumstance is not visible, but it's there, because these people will spend time in the lodging house and spend a whole morning, a whole evening in the lodging house, and you can just watch them survive in the company of each other at such a place. And a locksmith, why do you require a locksmith in the family? Because he is making locks or he is repairing locks, and which means that outside the lodging house there might be some work needed for help, and a locksmith then would be called to either open a lock or to provide a lock or to repair a lock. So he is a locksmith, and he has a wife who is 30 years old, and her name is Nastya. So you have an addition of another woman, and she will definitely participate in the collective action that is captured in the play. And then there is a streetwalker, the fourth woman. The streetwalker is a kind of a prostitute, and she doesn't have any work at all. She must be good looking, and she must be thinking of customers, and she also lives here. So you can see a wife, a sister-in-law, the wife of a worker, and then of course there is a streetwalker who just goes on with thinking of customers if she finds them on the road. Then there is another person called Kwashna, 40, and she is a woman who sells snacks. So she must be getting snacks from somewhere, made, cooked, and then she supplies them. Whether she does it here is not the question. The question is that she lives here. And that's how, this play, will be a kind of a working relationship shown on the stage and raising questions which very, very, vaguely, but then definitely there. Then there is a person called Bubno, another 40-year-old. Then there is a baron. Now this is an interesting character. No connection again with the crowd in the lodging house, but he has been from a high family. And barons were there, in Russia in the 18th century, and then they just lost their fortune, lost their lands, and things changed, of course, over a period of 50 years or 100 years. And the person doesn't have any means now, but he considers himself to be different from these people. He thinks it's beneath him talking to other people because he's a baron. He's from the aristocratic family. And he has no means to survive as a baron, so what does he do? He keeps showing off. He keeps quiet most of the time. And he generally is rebuking people, and people laugh at him. And when they laugh at him, then he doesn't know what to do. So you have a baron, and many amusing moments, many humorous moments emerge in the play when this baron, and he is called, his name is not given, he is a baron, of course traditionally, and therefore when they laugh at him, when they tease him, when they irritate him, then of course he gives cooked answers or pre-cooked answers, and he doesn't have any specific thing to say about himself or others. Then there are two actors. There are two people, Sartin, and he's called actor. You can see that the person doesn't have a name, and his name is actor, and because the word has a capital letter in the beginning, and they also intervene in whatever is happening on the stage. So it's difficult to think of this play as belonging to any particular family and any particular circumstance, and that it's all a kind of a group which is there as if on the roadside, and in the ultimate sense the lodging house also becomes a kind of a road. Then there is a person called Luca. He is a tramp. Tramp means he doesn't have a home anywhere, he doesn't even live here, he came and he stayed there for some time, and he will leave the place after some time. His only positive part is that he is 60 years. He is the senior most person in this group. What does it signify? You think about the answer. The writer perhaps is using him in order to give a sense of connection, because he is thinking about these people, and when they fight, then he is the one who will ensure peace in their case. So he is a guide. So you can see that he'll comment. What are his comments like? What authority does he have to give a comment on the conditions and the behavior of others? This question is raised, in the background of the play, and you have no clue except the ideas that he expresses in the play itself. So he is a guide. So whenever people have a difference of opinion, then he can give a point of wisdom to some people and say, please keep peace and don't think this way. And if you do not fight, if you try to understand things in their context, if you are wise, if you are good, if you have a kind of Christian faith in love, etc., then you will be actually out of the trouble. He can say that, and because he is 60 years, therefore some people might even listen to him. So he is a kind of a teacher, and a teacher who has an opinion, but his opinion is not a consistent opinion. His opinion changes from person to person, from situation to situation. So that's why I am not calling him a teacher at all. A teacher is very consistent. A teacher, says, remembers what he said yesterday. and what is said in one context, and the teacher will continue to hold that opinion in all other conditions also. But that's not the case with Tramp, Luca, because this person is a guide who will tell people the right thing, or the right answer in the situation in which they are caught. If the situation changes, then Luca also will change his opinion. And he is actually not a guide but a visionary. Who is a visionary? What's the meaning of a visionary? I think somebody might have a particular kind of role to play in society. That role is of preserving oneself. The other is that the person doesn't talk about the society at all. The person only talks about his ideals that are there in his life. And mostly, if you are experienced, if you have an experience of 60 years, starting from your childhood to when you became 60, and because you survived, you didn't die. And actually, if people don't die in Russia till the age of 60, then they must have been using methods which kept them alive and protected. So, and those methods and those ideas that help them remain alive, those are actually the wisdom. And if you keep that wisdom in mind, then you realize that is what visionaries do. They have a vision, they have a kind of wisdom in their hearts, and that they always dream about things. So dreaming is a good aspect, and in the course of dreaming they can say something that clashes with their earlier point of view. That doesn't bother them, and you have this character here. So what I say is that the only person who has some sense of sanity, some sense of education, some sense of experience, some sense of goodness, that is Luca in the play. So the critics might say that Luca perhaps is closer to the writer. You can say that, but the writer is hiding behind Luca, and at the same time Luca is not consistent. So what kind of a guide is he? The answer is that actually he is a guide, but then he has a vision that things don't change today, but they might change tomorrow, or even after 100 years. So a dreamer generally talks like that. A dreamer does not live in one's own conditions. A dreamer always dreams about possibilities, not about reality. Reality does not bother a dreamer. The dreamer goes into some kind of a vision, some kind of a train of thought, and then he will change his opinion, and you will finally listen to him because he will help you. So this is my comment on this is how I interpret Luca, and see his words that can be quoted here. In a context he says, meantime you be getting ready. He's talking to somebody, getting ready. Drop the vodka, because they are drinking vodka, and he says, no, don't drink vodka. You just say things as if you had understood what was going on around you. Take yourself in hand and hold on. It's a point of wisdom that you don't generally have control over yourself. Why don't you take situation in hand? Why don't you become responsible? And then that responsibility should be continued. So see his points of wisdom. This is how people can survive. If you're all the time drinking, then you can't think, and if you can't think, then the circumstances will control you. And he says, and then you will go for a cure and begin life all over again. So this life is bad, but you take things in your own control, and then think, and in that case life will become all over again. So this kind of a wisdom is there in the play, and he says, won't that be fine? So he's not giving an answer, he's simply saying something simple, and he says, all over again, just make up your mind once and for all. You can see his language. Make up your mind once and for all, and then he's using again. So these three words do not connect with each other. Then the actor smiles. Actor is a person there, I told you, and he says, all over again? All from the beginning? Yes, that sounds fine. And all over again? So he is actually pulling his leg. He is teasing him that he's using language very very loosely, and he says all over again. So how can Russians in the early 20th century begin all over again. So just see, the writer has not said anything on his own, but then there is a discussion here in this particular case about the actor and the visionary called Luca, that the life can become difficult, but you can also hold back and then you can live it all over again. So all over again is the message that the writer wants to give. And if you have this message, and then he laughs, the actor laughs at him and he says, of course, I can do it. Don't you think I can do it? But can they do it? That's what lower depths is raising as a question. So at the end I will conclude and I would say that these dialogues, and there are many dialogues of this kind, there will be dialogue about the usefulness of lies, of telling a lie. So all these things, keep the audience amused about how these people are going to tackle their conditions tomorrow and the day after. So it's a play that is caught, in 4 acts, and situations don't move, but then certain points of wisdom are actually thrown at the audience, and therefore this becomes a very important play as a social comment on the conditions in Russia in the 20th century. So it's a very important play. It's the play of a committed writer. It's a play that focuses upon reality that exists. It's also sends out a message indirectly that this kind of a reality is unbearable and this should be changed. That's how Maxim Gorky presented in lower depths a kind of a message, and that message has kept societies of different parts of the world thinking about their conditions and how they could change those conditions. Thank you.